Welcome back, quilting friends. We are now starting video number 4, and that video is how to trim your quilt and make your quilt binding. So if you have been sticking with us, you've gone through video number 1, where we pieced the quilt top together. Video number 2 is where we basted the 3 layers of your quilt. And then 3 is where we actually did the quilting. And so now that leads us to video number 4, where we will be trimming the quilt and making the quilt binding. Now, I like to do, in terms of how I trim my quilt, is I like to use one of the biggest rulers that I have to square up all of the corners, and then I will go through and connect those cuts. So hopefully this will be visible in this video. So this is a 12.5 by 12.5 quilt ruler. It doesn't need to be this large, but you do want to just make sure that you square up your corners. For me, I do like to use the larger block, because then as I'm connecting the corners, um, there's less straight lines, if you will, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so that's the first corner. And then I just rotate the quilt so that I can get all of the corners done first. And sorry for the lighting. It's a little bit dark over here, but hopefully you can see what I am doing. Again, just lining up this ruler with the edge of the quilt as best you can so that you can create the corners. Okay, that's corner number 2. Okay, last corner. Okay, so we have our 4 corners, and now I will show you what I meant by connecting the straight lines. So this is essentially just going up each of the sides and connecting your cuts. So I think this is visible here. That's good. Okay, so one side cut. This is why I like to use the larger ruler to square, because then, as you can see, there's less space that needs to be connected. That certainly works very well on the smaller size quilt. On the larger size quilts, you will have to do more cuts along the sides to connect them. But again, it does help to start with a larger squared up area. And so hopefully you can see this. I'm really just lining up my quilt ruler with the edge of where I cut for the squaring off portion. and then just connecting to the other end. Okay, 2 sides down. Okay, I did that way. This is also another reason that I like to add a border on my quilts, even if it's a small border like this one, where in the end it'll just be about 1 inch wide. Because as you're squaring up, it's invariable that you're going to end up cutting some portion of that border. And so I would rather cut into the border than to cut into the actual main portion of the quilt top. Okay, last side. Let's just cut that to separate it. Okay, so the quilt is all trimmed. We have 4 square corners. The next thing you want to do is to really just confirm your the dimensions or the size of your quilt, so that you can then go on to prepare your quilt binding. So I'm going to measure this quilt. I generally like to measure it on my design wall where it's straight and flattened out. Okay, 42, about 42. Okay, so the quilt is measuring 42 by 42 inches. So now I'm going to go back over to my sewing table, and I will show you the tool that I use to calculate how much fabric I will need for the quilt binding. Okay, so I know I said that I would show you the tool that I use to calculate how much fabric I need for, actually I use it for pretty much everything, but specifically I was going to show you how I use it to calculate how much fabric I need for the binding. But it has occurred to me that that app is on my phone, and I'm also using the phone to record, so cannot do both, but I will try to see if I can't maybe stitch a screenshot in so that you know what it is. It is an app that is available on or in the Android store, and so I imagine that it's available for iTunes as well. It's an app by Robert Kaufman, who does a lot of, well, I'll say that brand is used a lot for quilting fabric. Strips that I need to create the binding. And so I'm going to show you how you connect them all as soon as I actually thread the needle. So I guess there's probably more than one way, or I was going to say more than two ways to attach your strips that you've cut for the binding. I'm going to show you one method. So there's obviously you can connect it where you just connect them here, butting the edges up against each other and using a 1/4 inch stitch. Um, that works. I've done it before. There's no aesthetically, there's no reason not to do it. However, I do prefer to attach the binding such that it looks a little bit more seamless. So in order to do that, you are going to lay the right side of your fabric up, and then you're going to take another strip of it and place it right side down. You want to create an L, if you will. And then what you're going to want to do is sew a stitch from corner to corner. And then that's going to give you just one long strip, and you'll be able to open it up, and it looks really nice. But again, if you were to just stitch them, butting up the edges using a 1/4 inch seam, it doesn't take away from the quilt. But this is my preferred method. So some people will pin these two pieces of fabric together and then actually draw a diagonal line. And that's a good way to make sure that your line is 45 degrees and you're going corner to corner with no issue. I am going to use diagonal tape. So I have this tape attached to my machine already. And so I'm going to use that, and I will demonstrate that for you. And one thing I do want to point out, you'll notice that I've changed the foot on my machine. I've taken off the walking foot and I've added the scant 1/4 inch seam foot onto the machine. This is the foot, well, actually for my multiple feet came with it, but this is your default foot, right? So you can use this to do all of your piecing. It is a scant 1/4 inch. Earlier, I was using a 1/4 inch foot that actually had the guide bar on it. I like that one just so that I know consistently my seam allowance is a 1/4 inch. But you can certainly use this scant 1/4 inch foot as well. So you see me just angling the material here so that my stitch is going to end up being 45 degrees. And I'm lining it up with the center red mark on the diagonal tape. So that way I know that I am sewing at 45 degrees. And you just want to keep doing that for all of your strips. So I'm going to chain stitch these, so I'm not going to cut the thread between attachments. I won't do that until the end. So you just keep doing this. Just flip that strip over so that the right side is up. You take your next piece of fabric and lay right side down, and you just repeat that process. Okay, so all of the strips are attached. So I'm going to go through and just snip the stitch that's connecting them. So you should be able to see that you can open up or lay flat your strips. This is where they're connecting, and it just creates a really nice seamless strip of fabric that can be used for your binding. And so I would suggest you actually go through and open up each seam, if you will, just so that you can make sure that you've not mistakenly sewn anything on backwards. And once you have determined that you haven't and that all of the fabric is facing the right direction, you will want to go through and I'm actually not on camera here. So again, you want to be able to see that your two pieces of fabric, in this case, multiple pieces of fabric, they're all connected and that they're all facing in the same direction. The next step is you're going to want to cut off this excess material. And so to do that, you're going to take a ruler or you might want to eyeball it if you are in a bit of a hurry. But you want to take a ruler and cut off a 1/4 inch. So measure from the stitch line a 1/4 inch out, and then you want to cut. So let me demonstrate that here. This is the last seam. Okay, so now you've taken out that bulk. I'm going to go through and cut all of the excess pieces of fabric. And then I'm going to take this binding over to the sewing machine where I will do two things. I will iron my seam open. If I can get it open. So I'm going to go through for each of the attachment points. I'm going to cut off the excess material. I will open up the seams, and then when I take it over to the iron, I will iron the seams flat. And then I'm also going to take the entire binding and iron it over and fold it in 1/2 and iron it. So I'm going to pause while I continue to do that. And when I come back, I will show you how to attach your binding to your quilt. Thanks for stitching with me today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more quilting tips and tutorials.